So if we use our analytical mind and we start deciding everything we do, like, okay, I'm going to turn right now, I'm going to turn left now, I'm going to scratch my head because there's a tickle. If you had to use your analytical mind to do everything, you would, number one, never be able to think beyond, the immediate surroundings and think about those bigger picture things that are such a specialist of being a human being. But you would exhaust yourself because using your brain is exhausting. It really can. It uses a lot of your energy when you have to engage. So humans have developed these habits of mind so that we can do things without having to use our frontal cortex and our analytical abilities. We can make a peanut butter sandwich really fast. Sorry, I'm American. A Vegemite sandwich or a Marmite sandwich. We can do those things without thinking too much. We know where the bread is. We know where the knives are. We can get through our life without thinking very much. These habits of mind are beneficial in that we can get a lot done, but it also, we can generate habits of mind that aren't very helpful, like anger, depression, judgmental, jealousy. These habits, something happens, we have an emotion. They're out of our control because we're not engaging our special niche as a human being, and that's logic and reasoning. You know, as opposed to that bird who can fly, we can't fly, can we? But we've overtaken this world, and we're soon to overtake, the solar system. And who knows how far we will go before we make the big mistake and destroy ourselves as a species. But how far can we go? Well, the first place to go is to go inside. We've been going outside a long time. We have these technological advances and we have so many things as humans, so many amazing things. But how many of us actually go inside? And that's what Buddhists do. They go inside. They quit looking for answers out there. And because the answers are here, the answers that mean the most, the answers that control your attitude towards things and your happiness. And so these habits of mind are good to start paying attention to. And that's what mindfulness of the mind is. Geshe teaches us to have mindfulness of the body and mindfulness of things going on around us. And today we'll talk about mindfulness of the mind because that's really what floats my boat as far as practice. And I love it. It's a great practice. And so I'll share it with you. So, mindfulness of the mind is observing your habits of mind and where they lead you. And from that, you develop wisdom on a first person basis. And believe me, when you observe these things in yourself, you're not just learning about yourself, you're learning about all of human minds, and not just human. If you start paying attention to your dogs and your cats and the other animals around you, they're very similar. We all really operate very similarly. And my interests also led me, my interest in mindfulness of the mind led me to some Western psychology. They've also proven human minds tend to function very similarly in similar circumstances. So when you're learning about your own mind, you're learning about others' minds as well. And what that develops actually is a compassion for yourself and others, because what you see is suffering. You see people making mistakes all the time, hurting each other by selfishness and self-cherishing and not understanding that, what happiness is, where it comes from, and how we generate it. So back to what is meditation. Meditation is learning to observe your mind, the method we're gonna do today, but also it's methods to change your habits of mind. So generating healthy habits of mind. So instead of seeing something and an anger arising, you can see something and then start watching your mind. Like as soon as that usually makes me angry, let's see what happens now. You know what I mean? So you're on to it, onto those bad habits. You're on to them. When they arise, they're lessons and they're turned into something good instead of something bad when we used to operate ignorantly of these habits of mind. So all of a sudden, you're taking the bad things about human nature and turning them into something good. And that's lessons and that we can share with others. Any questions so far? Anybody disagree or have a different opinion? Yeah. Yeah. So you're talking busy, 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 or doing things that you might not think is ethical because you need to please your boss, or both? Yeah, okay. That's a good one. So we're really we're slaves to a culture that's very hedonistic. So we could pick a lot of topics, but work is a good one, eh? Because to sustain our lifestyle, we need means. So we all, most of us probably here, work for a living, and to do that, we're not necessarily working for ourselves. And even if we are working for ourselves, we have people who pay us for services, and therefore we need to know what they want and provide it. And so, yeah, it's a demand. It is a demand, and this is something that I may not be totally qualified because I could cause problems for people. I think having a job and lifestyle that's ethical would be wonderful, right? Because in my history, teaching and being in Buddhism, I've come upon people who just walk into a Buddhist center and they may serve alcohol for a living, for instance. One of my friends used to do that, and he kind of ran a RSA. Is that the right term for the retired army people? And and he had a real hard, heavy heart about that once he started practicing Buddhism. And I didn't have the wisdom to say this, but the nun that I was training under at the time, she said to him, "Do it joyfully. Bring something good in these guys. These people, as you serve them a drink, give them something positive." You know what I mean? She says you're in a position to actually influence people who may be depressed and suffering and alcoholics. You're right in the middle of that and you're having a heart and mind that is getting lighter and lighter and maybe less heavy and more observant. That might be the perfect avenue for you. So I think, when we are in situations that we, I think turning them to something good. There are Buddhist teachings. Those of you who study Buddhism a lot, the Buddha in his mind training, in the mind training exercises, it's taking what's bad into good, and that's the perfect avenue. Taking when you have that screaming boss, if you have a hard, mean boss, start developing compassion. Imagine being that person that has that mind that can yell, and be angry and mean to people. Start thinking about, I wonder, does his mother love him? Probably yes. Is he nice to his partner? Probably nicer than he is to me. Are there nice things about him? Start recognizing these things. And they're not angry people, they're people with angry actions, and how does this develop? And you understand, well, they're just like me. They have bad habits. They might not have a healthy lifestyle. They might be taking it out on me because I'm the one below them and they can boss me around. But, and you start developing compassion in these ways for other people and understanding the suffering I have from his actions. Imagine being the one that could dole that out, how hard that must be and how negative their mind must be. And so all of a sudden, the term is bodhicitta, that mind of wishing others to be happy and free of suffering, starts generating towards people at work who may be, so actually the work environment could be the best environment for practice. I certainly found that when I started meditating. Um, the hardest people in your life are your biggest lessons, for sure. And I certainly do think Buddhism helps us deal with those things. Did I provide anything for your question? Good. Oh yeah, good. Yeah. I think, but well, both. To me, mindfulness is, to me, it's my definition, is an observation skill. It's instead of thinking and judging, observing, learn from their actions. I mean, I do think we contribute to things around us quite a bit, and it's very exponential because just us being here today and discussing things may affect us a little bit later in the day. And if it's in a gently, maybe a slightly more positive aspect than what we might have done without a meditation in the morning, then that might be influence who we are interacting with, and they go on to interact with others. It's kind of like the spread of coronavirus. Instead of coronavirus, let's spread a little bit of positivity in this world. So I do think, we do influence each other for sure. I learned that any just walking down the street. When I started studying Buddhism, I noticed people were smiling at me all the time. I thought, oh my gosh, is my hair extra puffy today? Do I have something on my face? And what I realized, I was smiling at them. I was having love and compassion towards others. And it had generated in my heart on a level that I didn't have to bring it up anymore, because for me, the bodhicitta motivation, that's what we're talking about today again, I keep reminding you, um, is life changing. So instead of these people looking at them as a problem, we look at them with compassion. And yeah, maybe having this in our house might be very hard. And we do, and we're not saying you have to deal with this stuff and be a part of it. You can, it is hard to live, with somebody who's on drugs and drinking heavily. It's very hard. And it's not saying you have to stay in that situation as a Buddhist. It's saying you need to have a safe space so you can meditate and improve and think and read and and not be so upset or disturbed, but certainly maybe not pointing at them and calling them names and blaming them, understanding that their habits of mind may be very much in a bad place, very much, and having compassion. And like I say, you can't fix them. You really can't. I, I, the Buddha can't fix you. The Buddha's not a God who can tap you on the shoulder and go, be enlightened. That's not how it works. And it's the beauty of it. It's the beauty of Buddhism. You know, the Buddha was a man, just like we're a human. He trained his mind over lifetimes and found a pristine truth that's true for us all when it comes to human experience in this world and how things exist. And it's freedom what it provides. It's freedom of all those things of, you know, I'm a certain way. I'm an angry person. I'm a sensitive person. I'm a jealous person. It frees us. The mind is plastic and changing all the time. This person who may be a heavy drinker or a drug addict tomorrow may be standing up there on the stage lecturing our children on how bad drugs are. I've certainly met those type of people too. You know, trust me, I've done it. It's a wrong path. I can tell you, trust me. I'm cool too. You know how those guys get up there. You know what I'm talking about. They tour around New Zealand for our children to experience. Don't do it. I've seen my friends die. I've seen the suffering it generates. Trust me, skip that bit. And that's what the Buddha does. He guides us. He says, here is what's happening for us. He laid it out so basically. I remember I was so suffering the first time I read the Four Noble Truths. I just remember how my mind was. And I read the Four Noble Truths, and I'm like, why didn't I think of this? How long have I been suffering and watching and experiencing and doing the same mistake time and time and time? It seemed so fundamentally clear. It seemed ridiculous that I didn't figure it out for myself. It took somebody who worked on it a lot longer than I had, to figure it out. And the Buddha, 2,500 years ago, that's a mind boggling number, before the time of Jesus Christ, the time of the pyramids, I think all that was happening at the same time, the spiritual enlightenment around the world. Wow. It didn't take Western psychology and EEGs and all this stuff and even knowing human anatomy for the Buddha to figure out, because I think the first path, and the path we probably should be on from the time we're knee high or younger, is looking inside. How does the mind work? How do we go wrong as humans? And how can we fix these problems so that we're not hurting others? You know, but what were we taught when I grew up as an American? So I'm an American, so everything's exaggerated, so it's helpful, right? And look out for number one. That's what we were taught. It boiled down to look out for number one. You'd go to church and hear the golden rule: do unto others as you would want them to do unto you, which was a good lesson. But you go into business school or you go into this and that, and what your parents say, at least we're okay. The neighbors may be doing drugs and stuff, and it might be a rough neighborhood, but we sit together at dinner, we interact on a healthy way. We don't have the police coming here. We're okay, and that's just not the case, is it? If the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Sorry for using the H word if that's a cuss word to you. Can you truly be happy? Is the question. Can you truly be happy when there's suffering all around you? I think that, first of all, sorting out your own mind is a good place to go so then you can help others on a wise, with wisdom. Because kicking our sons out because they do drugs or leaving our partners because they drink too much, is that really going to fix the problems that we have and that they have? Certainly, I think separating ourselves from horrendous suffering would be wonderful so we can actually make progress, on getting a healthy mind, stopping, the excruciating pain. Like, I have a bad back, and when I have an excruciating pain in my back, I have a real hard time meditating. I'm not a really super experienced meditator, and it is hard for me to overcome strong physical suffering. Or like when my mother passed away, it was hard for me to sit and meditate and find peace. But I could certainly improve the situation by connecting with an honest wisdom of think change happens. The things that Buddha has taught me through all my glorious teachers like Geshe-la, you know, expecting anything other than death is silly as a human, expecting to live forever. How silly is that? Of course we're going to die. Why would it why would we expect anything else? You know? Of course, she had terrible disease. Of course she was going to die. Using wisdom, not why me? Why me? That's that we do with ignorance, right? Of course, things happen. That's the one thing that you can guarantee is change is going to happen constantly on microscopic level and on gross huge levels all the time. And you learn to surf and ride that change in the healthiest fashion you can. And you bring it, you accept it, and you bring it into your life, and you learn to calm down and don't overreact with emotion. Emotion is habits of mind, not wisdom. Emotion is maybe, running from that loud noise or flinching. Those are instincts we have to self protect, and they're not necessarily helpful in most of our day to day lives. So we use wisdom in how we react to things instead of overreacting with too much emotion. And so I think that the Buddhist teachings on this basic level provide the foundation for all of life. And I think we could stay in the basic teachings in Buddhism and become fully enlightened. There are so many teachings out there. Those of you who have been to many Buddhist teachings and you might study texts and do these things, you can go and what I found is every practice they say, you take this to its fullest extreme and you can achieve enlightenment. And then I'll go to another teaching on a different practice. You take this to its fullest extreme and you can achieve enlightenment. And I would say, well, wait a minute. They just told me that in the last teaching. And they're like, because these things lead you. There's these many paths converge back on the fundamental truths is what happens. And that's where the Four Noble Truths come in again. Have you guys had teachings on the Four Noble Truths recently? Do you know what they are? So when the Buddha became enlightened, he entered this blissful state because when you become enlightened, it's a state of mind, right? He didn't go somewhere else, right? He didn't go somewhere else. He became enlightened, and think of it as a state of mind because everything is a state of mind. All our perception of everything we do is being filtered through our mind, and we decide how to react, believe it or not. And so the Buddha became enlightened and he entered this blissful state. And then eventually somebody's like, excuse me, Buddha, we know you're really in, this beautiful, blissful state, but we're back here suffering a whole lot. Can you come give us some tips, right? And so the Buddha, gave his first teaching. I can't remember how many days. Was it 49 days? I can't remember. I'm sorry. But a period after achieving enlightenment, he gave his first teachings to these 5 guys who he used to meditate with. These 5 people who were very close to enlightenment, right? He trained with many years. And what did he teach? He taught the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths are the basic essence of Buddhism. And so the first noble truth is based on this life is suffering. We're suffering. How about that? That when people first come into Buddhism and they hear that, they're like, I don't know if I want to be a Buddhist. That sounds really negative to me. But if you look at it, what is suffering? You need to have a definition of suffering other than, I just fell over, broke my arm, now I can't make dinner and I can't take a shower and I have a lot of pain. That's gross suffering. That's gross suffering. Or I've just lost my job and I'm homeless. That's really gross suffering, right? So that's one type of suffering. But there's other types of suffering that we need to consider. And there's a suffering of change. And that one's tricky for us because we don't want to die. We don't want our partner to die. We don't want our partner to walk out that door. We don't want to lose our job. We don't want to get old and develop disease. We don't want our car to break down. We don't want to have to move because we no longer have the money for the house we're in. We don't want these things to happen, but guess what? Things happen anyway. Good things happen too, eh? Good things, just as many good as bad, hopefully, for most of us, right? Happen. So that keeps us inspired, and it keeps us craving for these good things. And man, do we work hard to position everything just right so only good things happen. That's how I spend my life and my ignorance. And, work, 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 make a lot of money. Something breaks, lay down the cash to fix that problem, and yeah, I've gotten to a point to where I can do that, I've gotten to a point to where I have enough money and I can tell you what, it doesn't fix anything. So don't bother with that, So you need enough money to have the basics, right? You don't need, just everything else is wasted effort, really. And so the suffering of change is interesting. Sit cross-legged for an hour and a half, you guys on the floor. Now, Katie, you may be able to do it, but let me try to sit cross-legged on the floor. First, sitting down might feel really nice. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of tired. This feels good. About 20 minutes later, my feet are asleep. I'm like, uh-oh, this is horrible. If I had to get up right now, I wouldn't even feel my feet. Then my knees start aching. I'm like, oh, if only I could stand. If only I could stand. And then finally, let's say, all right, everybody stand up. Everybody stands up. Everybody's feeling better. Oh, the feeling comes back to my feet. Everything's feeling good. About an hour later, hour and a half, my back starts hurting. I'm getting a little tired. I'm like, man, if only I could sit. So it's just the suffering of change. Things are happening. Things happen for us, all the time, and we expect things to stay the same. We expect to stay young and beautiful, and we don't expect to die, and we don't expect bad things to happen, and that's just silly because things happen all the time, right? That's the way it goes. So we change our expectations is the key, and we quit overreacting, to things, good and bad. That would be wonderful, eh? And just let things occur. I think that would be wonderful. But I mean, to a degree, we need to know that well, if I'm going to put in effort to do this, I do expect to make money for my work, so then I can pay my mortgage, right? So I think some expectations, but not being so wedded to them that you're really disappointed when things don't go the way you expected them to. Understanding that you don't control the world. There's so many causes we can't see because we have blinders on. We just can't see all the causes that are going on out there. So not having and understanding that I'm not omniscient at this stage of the game, and so I may not be able to. My expectations may not come to fruition because of that. Right? I couldn't see all the variables in play. So and taking it lightly, I think. Yeah. Yes, there you go. Accept the outcome. That you've got it. So, if there's anybody online, the question was, should we not have expectations? And I think the perfect answer came from a member in the group here, and it's just live with the outcome without too much emotion about it and understand. You can almost laugh at yourself a little bit and go, well, I thought that I could control the world, and lo and behold, yet again, I know I can't, and that's the nature of it, and it's cyclic, isn't it? It's cyclic. We have a term cyclic existence, where we crave, we work hard to achieve, we acquire, and then we go back to craving again, and there's some suffering mixed in there too. I left a few steps out, but we have these cycles that occur, and it's so true. And we try to break cycles of expectations and being wedded to the outcome and being disappointed when it wasn't what we expected. So having expectations that when I get in my car it will turn on, that's a reasonable expectation. If it doesn't, then we change our plans, and try not to overreact and have a negative mind, and then take that out on the people who work for us or on our boss or our children, you know. So there's another type of suffering. We did talk about only two, and there's three types, and this is one that's insidious, and I think it is really the core of suffering. Um, and it's a pervasive suffering. And to me, when I have read about this and studied it and taken teachings, it's chronic discontentment. It's chronic discontentment. And like we said before, pleasure brings transient cessation of discontentment. That's where happiness comes from chocolate cake. That's where happiness comes from that new acquisition. For a brief moment, we're satisfied, and it feels so good. Imagine not craving. Imagine always being satisfied. Imagine not having, not thinking and believing that things out there bring happiness, finding it here. So therefore, you control your happiness. It's not, can I afford that thing? Did it come in the mail today? Am I going to get that raise that I've always been expecting? Knowing that these are things. Things happen. They have causes. I accept that. Outcomes may be not what I expected because I'm ignorant, of all the causes. But I can learn to not need external things for happiness. That takes a long time. It's a long path, but we've taken a long time to get where we're at. We can't expect a week or even a month or even a year of practice is going to completely remedy our problems. It's, you build up to something, it takes time to build down, and it's a gentle, slowly. I've learned because I'm old and I'm having a midlife crisis and I'm finally wakening up to maybe, what I was told on the commercials that this will bring happiness if you eat at Burger King, maybe that's not true. Maybe. And you start unraveling those misconceptions. And even a little bit of improvement feels huge because you're relieving that pervasive suffering ever so slightly. It just starts unraveling and loosening, and you get gentle in your mind, and you smile and you relax. When things happen, of course, His Holiness the Dalai Lama cries when his loved ones die, but he doesn't carry it very far beyond that. He rejoices in their life. He misses them, but he understands cause and effect, and he continues going through life with a very balanced mind and a very even approach to things, and very, equanimity, for all beings, not just humans, but all beings and all things of life. He continues. So it's okay to have things arise in your life. It's what you do with that. What you do with that. And all of us have hardship. All of us. I bet you we could go around the room and tell some terrible tales of woe. I guarantee all of us have something big that's happened to us, or something that's driven us to meditate, right? To look for other avenues in life. And trust me, we are creating them. And that's what the second noble truth is. There is a cause to this suffering. There's a cause. And as much as we don't want to hear it, and it's hard to believe, is we are creating it by our own self-cherishing. We are all narcissists. It's the nature. I think it's an instinct. I really do. I think animals have it because it's how they evolve, right? That's how, if you Love yourself more than the other guy, you can kill him if he's threatening you. So therefore your genes go on. So I do think that's a component of evolution. But we've learned that it causes immense suffering for our species and the world in general by having that approach of I'm more important than you because all I can know is my mind and I know I'm suffering. And if you're threatening to hurt me or take away something from me or anything, I'm going to, you're not important to me and you're my enemy. And so therefore I can do mean things to you. And we convince ourselves of this, and even our politicians, look at what we do. Well, maybe not New Zealand, but America just goes at them with bombs and stuff, and sends our men in to die, to kill. We take our young men and send them to kill people because they made us mad or they took something that we might need in the future, like oil, you know? And so, wow, it can really get out of whack, can it? It can really go too far. And it happens in our minds too, maybe not to that degree, thank goodness, but and this, thinking of ourselves as the most important is it's our biggest poison. And not appreciating the fact that we are all very similar. We want to be happy. We don't know how to do it. We hurt each other along the path without meaning to, most of the time, probably, just in trying to find happiness for ourselves. And the Buddha taught, well, there's your problem. That's your noble truth number 2. There's your problem. Don't worry about yourself so much. Don't worry about, the more you worry about yourself, the more suffering you're causing yourself. If I go out there, if I've got a neighbor who has broken their leg, not you, Katie, of course. If I have a neighbor who broke their leg and they can no longer tend their garden, and that's important to them, and I go over there and tend their garden for them, that makes me feel so good inside. I have done something for somebody who needed some help, and it brings me this peace. You know what I mean? Just holding the door open for somebody with their arms full. Do you know that feeling of, it might be a small wave, but it's like, it really felt nice. If you're watching your mind, it brings a smile to your face. It brings a smile to their face. It affects their life. Imagine doing that all the time. Everything you do is for somebody else. You're always smiling, you know? You're always smiling. If I weed my garden, guess what? The weeds come back next week and I get mad. I'm like, I just did that. I got to get out. And it feels like a burden, doesn't it? Where if I did it for my neighbor, I might look at my weeds in my garden and said, well, but my neighbor's garden looks nice and she needed it more than me. Do you see the difference there? It's just by giving and thinking of others, it makes us feel good. If you have a positive attitude and you have a generosity in your heart, whether it works or not, it makes you feel good. If I tried to fix my own car and it didn't work, I'd get angry. If I tried to fix yours and change your tire and it didn't work, it's still, well, man, I had love for you and care, and it brings out something in me that's very essentially good. And so just something about thinking of others, caring for their happiness as much as you care for yourself. And what you'll learn is the more you do these things and think of others in this way, the happier you are. You might have a broken down car, but you have a happy heart and you have a happy life. And what's more important in the long run? And so the Buddha taught us your cause of suffering is self-cherishing. There's a cause of suffering. Find it. Don't believe me. That's what the Buddha said. Certainly don't believe me. I'm nobody special. Start looking in your own mind. Observe your feelings after doing things. Observe your feelings and you'll learn from yourself. Do things. Go out of your way to do something for somebody. And don't expect anything in return. Don't expect them to send you a Christmas card because you did something nice. Just give it freely. Let it go and put it out there. That's our contribution to this world, right? That's our contribution. Happiness and lightness and joy and generosity and wishing others happy. You do that and you will achieve enlightenment with that practice and that alone. I trust that. I really do. You bring that into your life. It may not be in this lifetime, but if reincarnation is true, if this energy we put out there and this energy that makes us alive and interact and consider what we are in this world and where we're going, if you bring in generosity and loving kindness into that, wow, you're going nothing but to a better place in your mind. And remember, it's your mind that's creating your experience. You're deciding is it good or bad and then reacting to it. So might as well take direction. Just like you did that creme brulee. You learned what is the recipe for creme brulee. That's what the Four Noble Truths are. They're a recipe. How do I achieve it? How do I achieve that perfect creme brulee that I can offer Geshe-la? How can I achieve that happy life? By understanding where your suffering's coming from. Your suffering's coming from self-cherishing, wanting yourself to be happy, and going about it the wrong way, and not even understanding what happiness is and where it comes from. Happiness is not having a nice house. It's not having a lot of money. It's not having a beautiful family. It's not having your health. It's not what happiness is. What is happiness? The Buddha tells us it's a peaceful mind. It's a mind that can relax, let cause and effect happen, and not overreact, and wish for happiness in others. The third and fourth noble truths are there can be a cessation to suffering. And don't get demoralized by understanding that things can cause suffering. Good, things that we tend to think are good, like a fancy house, they can cause you suffering. Don't get demoralized by that. Suffering is occurring. There's a cause for it, very clearly laid out by the Buddha. Watch in your own mind. See, is it true? Don't believe anybody. Watch. Learn to watch with meditation and mindfulness. And then there can be a cessation to that suffering. And that's what enlightenment is. But you can have small little cessations along the way. Small realizations that bring happiness. Happiness is not something, it's not a light switch that you turn on. It's a gradual, even a little bit of alleviation of your suffering brings peace. It's all relative right now, right? If you're suffering in your mind, which I guarantee we all are, unless there's some Buddhas out there looking out for us in the room today, all of us are suffering. Just alleviating a little bit of suffering by finding wisdom in your own heart and acting on it is tremendous. So it's a gradual process. Don't expect things to happen fast. It's a gentle lightening, refreshing of the mind, laughing at ourselves a little bit, understanding, continue to read and study. Basic Buddhist philosophy is all we really need when we're starting, and just consider it and start watching. And it all comes alive in your mind pretty quickly, if you're paying attention. And the last noble truth is that there's a path. There's a path. It's been laid out. It's been written down. It's being taught. We're talking about it right now. You're here. How about that? You're on the path, whether you know it or not, to alleviating your own suffering. And the path is, the Buddha's teachings are a path that will lead you to relief of suffering. And so when we talk about practicing the path has many aspects, right? There's many teachings out there. There's many books. There's many teachers. There's many different types of Buddhism, all based on the truths that the Buddha taught. You get cultural aspects woven in and beautiful things. I think the thing, especially for Westerners to understand, is that Buddha's teachings are there. They are the foundation, and they're just, I use the word pristine. That's probably my fifth time today, but what other word? They're just as pure and simple and eloquent as they can be, Buddhist teachings. And so don't get confused. Don't get lost in it all. Find it. Learn how to meditate so that you can find it in your own self. Usually what I do with meditation, there's different styles of meditation. I'll just share with you what works for me. Geshe-la teaches you something just a little bit different. But what works for me is I'll pick up a teaching of the Buddha, and I'll read it, and I'll get inspired. I'll refresh my mind with something very simple and elegant that the Buddha taught. I'll put the book down, and then I'll do my meditation. So let's get ready for meditation. We've got 35 more minutes, and the first thing I want to talk about is your position for meditation. And there's a proper meditation position if you are limber and young and healthy, and most of you can do it, or you can train yourself to this position of sitting cross-legged on the floor. And I apologize for not doing it myself. I've injured my back yet again. I have a bad back, so I usually sit in a chair. I have a kneeling stool. Here's an example of a kneeling stool here. That's wonderful, isn't it? Especially if you have a bad back. The kneeling stool's brilliant. It gets you your leg. I put my legs under it, and it's a low stool, so you can be near the ground but feel real stable without your weight on your knees and such. So get somewhere that you're comfortable. Don't be uncomfortable physically for meditation. I mean, I think it is nice to get to the point where you can sit like all these lovely people do. If it, that's something that come. If you're like me, you need to be comfortable. You need not to have anything hurting too badly, especially when you're a beginner meditator. So get comfortable. And the proper, Buddhist way is legs crossed. Um, Back straight is very important. So whether you're in a chair or you're on the floor, keep your back straight. If you slump and get kind of a lazy posture, your mind goes with it a bit. Something about pulling your lumbar spine kind of forward, tilting your pelvis forward, and your shoulders stay kind of back. You're not sitting rigid. You're comfortably sitting, but you're in an alert posture, right? It's an awake. We're not just going into la la land. We're actually training our mind, and we're changing our habits of mind in meditation. So it's a bit of an active process, right? So we want to be awake and alert. So what you do with your hands, there's a couple of different ways. If you put your hands on your knees, that's one way. You can do with what your hand, if you have different practices. Some, like the Transcendental meditation used to hold their hands in a certain way. In Tibetan Buddhism, we tend to put our hands in our lap in front of our belly, and we put our right hand on top of our left, and we touch our thumbs together. And if you can do that comfortably without thinking about it much, that's great. It's good to get good habits from the get-go, by the way. So that's why we tell you these things. And you want to be in a position to where probably your jaw's not just hanging wide open, because as you meditate, you're not thinking about, because we're not doing mindfulness of the body. What we're doing today, we're doing mindfulness of the breath and mindfulness of the mind is what we're going to be focusing on. So you're going to kind of forget about your body as you get deeper into meditation. And we don't want to drool down our chin and things, right? So one of the tricks they teach you is to take your tongue and touch it to your hard palate, the top, the roof of your mouth. And if you put your tongue in that position kind of forward and on the roof of your mouth, it tends to, there's a lot to that. It tends to keep those things from happening, right? And also we tilt our head down just a little bit. We don't hang our head, but our head is just gently positioned down. I was told a couple of meters in front of you, and that always worked for me. And your eyes are better not to be completely closed. At least if you meditate at home, you should learn to keep your eyelids from closing completely, because if you're like me, you might go to sleep. And that's not really meditation, is it? It's a nap. So if you want to stay awake and alert and a little bit stimulated, just a little bit of light coming through. So the ideal position is lids almost closed with just a little gap to let a little light in, not focusing on what's in front of you, just kind of a gentle gaze, because our focus is going to go inward. And that's what meditation is. It's going inward, learning to look at our mind and understand it. And we're going to do that first by taking deep breaths. When we take deep breaths, it changes our physiology. It stimulates the hormones in our body that is just the complete opposite of fight and flight. We change our sympathetic tone and we calm. So any time you want to meditate, start with deep breathing. And it doesn't have to be forceful. That's a different style of deep breathing. Just nice, expand your diaphragm, contract your intercostal muscles so that your thoracic cavity expands. Fill your lungs and exhale. And don't be shy if, at any time of your life, if you're feeling stressed or anxious, heavy-minded, deep breathing is your friend. Don't forget it. You can do it anywhere. But starting your meditation with it is very wholesome and helpful. So as we move into our breathing meditation, we're working on mindfulness that we are meditating and concentration on the breath. Our object of meditation is the breath. We're training our mind to just let go of the things that have happened earlier today, yesterday, or in our past. And we're not thinking about what's going to happen after class. We're not thinking about the rest of our day. We're not thinking about our vacation coming up. We're not thinking about anything else except this present moment. And we anchor that moment with our breath. So if you're having distractions arise, you have memories or thoughts arise, it's a normal process. Our mind thinks a lot, and our breathing is usually not in our conscious awareness. So we'll use this opportunity to understand that this thought that arises is just a thought. It's not who we are. It's just a habit our mind has of moving and remembering and thinking. But right now, we're trying to train our mind to be a little more resilient than spontaneous thought. We're trying to train our mind to stay present with the breath as our object so we can develop deep skills in concentration and mindfulness. So when the thought arises and you wake up in a thought, just label it thought. Notice where it arose from and where it disappears to, into just an open awareness of your mind, and then gently bring your mind back to the breath in the present moment. So if distractions arise and thoughts arise in your mind when you're meditating, this is not something to belittle yourself for doing. There are no bad meditators. These are lessons. These are arisings that are happening all the time. They don't get worse when we meditate. We're just being observant at this time. Notice how they seem to arise from nowhere, and they seem to just disappear. If we can move back to our breath and truly become focused on our breath, they're gone. Notice the flavor they bring and how they can flavor our mind while they're arising. The way our mind develops is we have lots of thoughts, and we're trying to direct our mind and develop a skill set that can focus on a particular aspect of life and that can understand as distractions arise that they are not who we are. They're just a habit of mind that we're used to operating in a way where thoughts arrive quickly, spontaneously, and we get distracted, trying to develop a more powerful concentration so that our mind can operate in a much more functional way. And parallel to that, we're, we're also able to be observant of what thoughts are, how they influence us, and that we can control them. We can control our mind with practice and leave thoughts alone. And when we take our attention from the distraction, they disappear. They're not permanent fixed things that are stuck, that we're stuck with. The mind is changing every moment. And with practice, we can learn to control the mind instead of being controlled by distracting thoughts. So I'm going to be quiet for a while and we'll work with that. If you have any tension or pressure or pain, please don't be so shy that you don't correct your posture to fix that. For the last couple of minutes of our meditation, I want you to imagine in front of you the Buddha, basically the epitome of pure love and compassion and wisdom. And the Buddha is glowing bright with this love and virtue. And this is shining all around in front of us, and it's emanating out into the world in all directions. And as we breathe in, every breath we take in, this beautiful purifying light comes into our own body, and it washes through us, through every part of us, up through our brain, and our skull, and our ears, and our neck, through our shoulders, and our arms and fingers. It just fills us, every breath. More and more of this light enters our body. And with every exhale, everything in us that is sullied, unhealthy, unhelpful, hurtful, gets blown out as black smoke with every exhalation. And then we inhale again this bright light. And every breath we take in is purifying our body and our mind. Very lightly, very gently. Till we're full of light in our hearts and in our minds. We feel this love and compassion and healthy goodness and true wisdom. We can feel how good it can be in our minds. The more we bring this into our mind, and the more we train our mind to habituate to a positive, helpful, truthful way of existence. And we just wish it for everybody, not just human, all of our suffering animals and sentient beings in all the worlds. How wonderful this world would be if we weren't all suffering. So we do our part. We do our part to find wisdom and to share it in our actions of body, in our actions of speech, and in our thoughts. So bring your awareness back to the room. So that meditation that we just did lasted totally 22 minutes, which is a long meditation if you're new to meditation. As Geshe-la instructs, you don't need to meditate very long. I wanted to give you a couple of different modifications of the breathing meditation that I personally love. And so I reserved a few minutes for any questions or discussion. You're not keeping us late to ask. You can, if you have an experience you want to share or a question about the posture or the meditation itself. Or if not, we can go down to lunch a little early. Great. Excellent. Well, thank you guys. It's a lovely morning sharing it with you. Thanks for coming. Cheers.